Fu stepped into the small hotel room in Da Nang, the base for his long business trip. The warm, golden glow of the ceiling lights spread softly across the room, casting a gentle hue on the desk where he dropped his heavy briefcase with a sigh. After a long day filled with endless reports and dizzying numbers, his mind was still spinning, unable to escape the stress. Yet the only thing Fu craved at that moment was a little peace, a moment to unwind. He instinctively reached for his phone, a habitual act to escape reality for a brief respite. Scrolling through his social media feed, familiar posts and images passed by in a blur. But suddenly, his thumb froze mid-swipe. A video had popped up, grabbing his attention like a bolt of lightning. It was a wedding, grand, luxurious, and breathtaking. The radiant glow of fairy lights, the harmonious melody of a love song, and the beaming smiles of the bride and groom created an atmosphere of joy and celebration. At first, Fu watched absent-mindedly, ready to move on, but then something stopped him cold. His eyes locked on the bride. In that white dress, radiant like an angel, stood Huai, the woman who had been his wife for 7 years. His heart skipped a beat, then pounded loudly in his chest. Was it really her? He squinted, bringing the phone closer to his face as disbelief and confusion tangled in his thoughts. No, it can't be, he muttered, trying to steady his breath. Yet the more he looked, the clearer it became. It was her. The same gentle eyes, the same radiant smile, every detail unmistakable. His hands trembled as he zoomed in on the screen to confirm what his mind refused to accept. Beside her stood a man, a tall, elegant figure who held her hand as they both smiled joyously, surrounded by cheering guests. Fu's heart sank. Questions flooded his mind, one crashing into another, each more piercing than the last. What is she doing there? Why is she in this wedding? And who is that man? His pulse raced as his thoughts spiraled into chaos. He couldn't suppress the urge any longer. His fingers moved on their own, dialing Huai's number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Each tone felt like an eternity. Finally, her voice came through, soft, familiar, but somehow distant. Why are you calling? Is something wrong? She asked gently, though her tone carried a hint of hurriedness. Fu fought to steady his voice. Where are you right now? He demanded, his tone sharper than usual. I'm at home, looking after our child. Why? She replied without hesitation. Her answer hit him like a splash of cold water. He clenched his phone tighter, trying to suppress the anger bubbling inside. Are you sure you're at home? He pressed, his voice dropping lower. I just saw a wedding video, and you were in it. There was silence on the other end, the kind of silence that screamed louder than words. After what felt like an eternity, Huai finally spoke, her voice shaky and defensive. What are you talking about? You must have mistaken me for someone else. I'm really at home. Fu didn't say another word. He ended the call abruptly, his eyes still glued to the video on his screen. There she was, Huai in her wedding dress holding another man's hand. His breathing grew heavier. This time he paid closer attention to the details. The video's caption mentioned the venue, Royal Palace Restaurant. The wedding had taken place just last week. His chest tightened. Suspicion morphed into an unbearable ache, spreading through his body like poison. Unable to sit still, Fu grabbed his laptop and began furiously searching for information. He dug into every detail he could find about the wedding venue and contacted the account that had uploaded the video. After a brief exchange of messages, the truth began to surface. Yes, the bride is Huai, the uploader confirmed. She's an old friend of mine, a wealthy widow. The wedding was last weekend. Do you know her? Widow. The word cut through Fu like a knife. No, that couldn't be true. Huai wasn't a widow. She was his wife, the woman he had loved, trusted, and built a life with for the past 7 years. His mind reeled, struggling to make sense of the nightmare unraveling before him. That night, Fu sat in front of his laptop, unable to sleep. He combed through every piece of information he could find, each discovery feeling like a blow to the chest. Finally, he decided to check their joint financial records. His heart pounded as he reviewed past transactions. One account stood out, a mysterious account where large sums of money, his money, had been deposited regularly. The account belonged to Hawaii. As he dug deeper, the horrifying truth began to emerge. Over 2 billion Vietnamese dong that he had given Hawaii to invest in her business had been used as a down payment for a house. But the house wasn't in both their names. It belonged solely to the man in the wedding video. Fu's body shook as the weight of betrayal pressed down on him. The memories of their life together flashed before his eyes. Her smiles, her reassurances, her promises. All of it now felt like a cruel illusion. The love and trust he had poured into their marriage were shattered, replaced by a storm of pain and disbelief. What had he done to deserve this? How long had she been lying to him? And above all, why? The questions clawed at his soul, leaving him drowning in a sea of despair. That night, sitting alone in the dim glow of his laptop, Fu realized that the life he thought he knew had been nothing more than a carefully constructed lie. Marriage, for many, it's a sacred bond built on love, trust, and commitment. But for Fu, his marriage with Hawaii had become nothing more than shattered fragments of lies and betrayal. Sitting in the cold, lifeless hotel room, he felt as if the world was collapsing beneath his feet. The memories were overwhelming. He thought of the countless times Hawaii had asked for money, always justifying it with work expenses, the long business trips she claimed were necessary, but now everything was as clear as day. The truth stood before him like a cruel enemy, and his red, sleepless eyes were filled with tears he refused to let fall. Fu knew he had to face the reality, no matter how excruciating it was. He had no choice. Returning home from his work trip earlier than planned, Fu's heart felt unbearably heavy. The revelations he'd uncovered refused to let him breathe. As he pulled into the driveway, the soft golden rays of sunlight streamed through the glass windows of the house. A house that once held so much warmth now felt distant and cold. Each corner, each piece of furniture seemed to scream accusations, as if the walls themselves bore witness to the charade his marriage had become. This wasn't just a house, it was a stage for a twisted play. He stepped inside. Hawaii, busy in the kitchen, startled slightly when she saw him but quickly composed herself. With a faint smile, she said, "You're home early. Why didn't you let me know? I could have prepared something." Fu didn't respond. His footsteps were slow and deliberate as he walked into the room, his piercing gaze locked on her. Her voice, her presence, the very sight of her, everything felt foreign. His heart shattered anew as he pictured her wearing a wedding dress, not standing beside him but next to another man. The image burned in his mind. He slammed a stack of papers onto the table. His voice was hoarse, almost unrecognizable. "Hawaii, explain this to me. That wedding, what was that?" Hawaii froze. Her eyes widened in shock, her hands trembling as she picked up the photographs and documents spread before her. They were undeniable proof. Photos of the wedding, bank transfers, even details of a secret property she'd kept hidden. You found out?" she murmured, her voice barely audible as her eyes darted away. Fu's tone was cold and cutting. "Did you really think I'd never find out? How long were you planning to keep lying to me? How long, Hawaii?" His words were sharp, laced with a pain and anger that had been building for years. Hawaii sighed deeply, her eyes welling with tears. I'm sorry, I didn't want you to know, but I had no other choice. Fu let out a bitter laugh, a sound that held no joy. No other choice? You betrayed me, you lied to me, and now you dare to say you had no choice. What about our daughter? Is she even my child? At the mention of their daughter, Huai lowered her head. She couldn't meet his eyes, which now seemed to burn with rage and heartbreak. After a long, suffocating silence, she whispered, her voice trembling, "No, she's not. She's not your biological daughter. She's mine, and someone else's. I didn't tell you because I was afraid you'd leave us." Her words pierced through Fu like a dagger. The child he had loved, nurtured, and cherished for years was not his. The memories of laughter, of tender moments with her suddenly felt hollow. All of it had been a lie. Fu sank into a chair, his head falling into his hands. He tried to suppress the storm of emotions raging within him: anger, sadness, humiliation. He felt like a puppet in a grotesque drama that Huai had orchestrated. His voice broke as he spoke. "Do you even realize what you've done to me? To us? I worked day and night, went on endless business trips, endured the loneliness, all for you and our daughter. Everything I did was for this family, and this is how you repay me?" Huai fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "I know I was wrong. I know I made mistakes, but I didn't have any other way out. Life with you, it wasn't enough for me. I needed more. I wanted our daughter to have a better future, better opportunities. Please, Fu, try to understand." Fu shot up from his seat, his eyes blazing with contempt. "A better future? You think lying and deceit can build a better future for her? Do you think this is the happiness you wanted to give her? You took the $2 billion I gave you to start a business and used it to buy a house for that man. Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" Huai gasped, her face pale with fear. "How? How do you know?" Fu reached into his pocket, pulling out a stack of bank statements and legal documents. He threw them onto the table. "These are the records. Every transaction, every lie. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Did you think I was stupid enough not to check?" Huai couldn't utter a word. She knelt there, sobbing uncontrollably, her tears falling onto the floor. She never imagined her carefully concealed secrets would be exposed so brutally. Fu's voice trembled with anger. "Did you really think I would just forgive this? That I'd let this go because you cry and apologize? No, Huai, it's over. Everything between us ended the moment you started lying." Without another word, Fu turned and walked out the door. His heart was heavy, his steps unsteady, but he knew he couldn't stay. Not for another minute. The house, once a home, had become suffocating, filled with the echoes of betrayal. As the door closed behind him, the silence that followed was deafening. Walking into the night, Fu felt a strange mix of sorrow and liberation. Yes, his world had fallen apart. Yes, his heart was broken beyond repair. But for the first time in years, he could see the truth. And even though it hurt, he knew it was the first step toward healing. The house was filled with memories, some real, some deceptive. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky a fiery red. But in Fu's heart, there was only blackness, shadows of betrayal and unbearable pain. He walked out of the home he had once called his sanctuary, each step heavier than the last. His heart felt shattered after the confrontation with Huai, the woman he had loved and trusted deeply for the past 7 years. Her words echoed endlessly in his mind, cutting him like a blade that would never heal. "The child isn't your biological daughter." Fu didn't know how long he had been driving. He only realized where he was when he parked by the river, a quiet spot where he had often come to think whenever life felt overwhelming. The water flowed dark and sluggish, mirroring the storm in his soul. He tried to hold back his emotions, but the tears spilled over. She betrayed me, he thought bitterly, his voice breaking in his mind. Everything was a lie. Pain and anger coursed through him, yet beneath the surface of his fury something stronger stirred, a fierce determination. He couldn't leave things as they were. He couldn't let Hawaii and the man she was now with continue living under the veil of deception. He also couldn't let himself drown forever in this sea of agony. The next morning, Fu set out on a methodical investigation. He rewatched the video of his wedding, paying close attention to every detail, the name of the venue, the date, and the familiar faces in the crowd. Every piece of information was etched into his memory. He also reached out to his best friend, Hai, a seasoned investigative journalist. "Hi, I need your help," Fu said over the phone, his voice firm and unwavering. "I need to know everything about the man in this video. Send me the details. I'll handle it," Hai responded without hesitation. Within hours, Hai called back, his tone grim. The information he had uncovered left Fu both shocked and furious. The man Hawaii was now calling her husband was Long, a well-known businessman with a notorious reputation. Long had been implicated in numerous fraud schemes. Worse, the house Hawaii now claimed as hers, where she lived with their daughter, had been bought using Fu's money. It was only a small part of Long's elaborate manipulations. "Be careful, Fu. This guy is no ordinary con artist," Hai warned. "I know what I need to do," Fu replied. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned with resolve. That afternoon, Fu received word that Hawaii and Long were hosting a celebration dinner at the Royal Palace restaurant, the very venue where his wedding had taken place years ago. It was a twisted irony, but also the perfect stage to expose the truth. Before heading out, Fu meticulously prepared everything. He gathered every piece of evidence, their wedding photos, their daughter's birth certificate, bank statements, and Hai's investigative report on Long. Each item was like a weapon, sharp and precise, ready to bring down the facade that Hawaii and Long had built. The royal palace glowed with brilliant lights, welcoming well-dressed guests to the grand event. Hawaii appeared in an elegant gown, her face radiant but betraying a flicker of unease in her eyes. Long stood confidently by her side, exuding charm and composure. He had no idea that a storm was about to descend. Inside, the room buzzed with laughter and conversation, but then the grand doors of the restaurant swung open with a loud thud. All heads turned as Fu entered, dressed in a black suit. His face was stern, his demeanor commanding, like a judge walking into court. The room fell silent, the cheerful atmosphere evaporating instantly. Fu strode forward, taking the microphone from the MC without asking. He climbed onto the stage where Hawaii and Long stood, his deep voice breaking the silence. "I'm sorry to interrupt this celebration," he began, his tone calm but charged with authority. "But there are truths that everyone here deserves to know." Hawaii froze. Her face turned pale as she gripped Long's arm tightly, but Long pulled his arm away, his eyes narrowing in irritation. Fu opened his briefcase and pulled out a large wedding photo, holding it high for all to see. "This is my wedding photo with Hawaii, taken 7 years ago," he said, his voice carrying through the room. "We were married and had a daughter together." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Hawaii tried to maintain her composure, but her eyes betrayed her growing panic. Fu continued, his voice unwavering. "But that's not the whole truth. The daughter I've loved and cared for over the years is not my biological child." He held up the birth certificate. "Here is her birth certificate. My name is listed as the father, but in reality, the child was born from an affair between Hawaii and another man." The murmurs in the room grew louder, turning into gasps and exclamations. Long turned to Hawaii, his face twisting in anger. "Is this true? Have you been lying to me?" he demanded, his voice sharp. Hawaii reached for Long's hand, but he yanked it away, his expression cold and furious. "You deceived me too, didn't you?" he spat, stepping away from her. Fu didn't stop there. He pulled out Hai's report and addressed the crowd. "And as for this man, Long, he's not who you think he is. He's a fraud, a man who uses others for his gain. The house Hawaii claims is hers was bought with my money. Every step they've taken has been built on deceit." The room erupted into chaos. Guests whispered among themselves, some staring at Hawaii in disbelief, others looking at Long with suspicion. Hawaii's carefully constructed image crumbled before everyone's eyes. Long, visibly enraged, stormed off the stage, leaving Hawaii standing there alone, trembling. Fu's voice softened, but the intensity in his eyes remained. "For 7 years, I gave my love, my trust, and my life to this woman. Today, I take it all back, and I will make sure justice is served, for me and for my daughter." With that, Fu turned and walked out of the room, leaving the crowd stunned and Hawaii in tears. The truth had finally been revealed. Fu's heart was still heavy, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a glimmer of hope. This was the beginning of his journey to healing and reclaiming his life. Fu held up the bank statements and financial documents for everyone to see. "This is proof," he said firmly. "She took more than 2 billion dong from me under the pretense of business investments, but in reality, the money was used to buy a house under Long's name." The room fell into complete chaos. Huai dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "I was wrong," she sobbed. "I know I was wrong. Please forgive me." Fu stared at her, his eyes filled with disappointment and disdain. He shook his head slowly, his voice cold and resolute. "There is no chance left. It was over the moment you decided to deceive me." Long turned away and walked out, leaving Huai crumpled on the floor. Fu left the restaurant shortly after, his heart heavy yet oddly relieved. At last, the truth was out. Outside, the night had fully descended. The wind blew through the streets, adding to the chill in the air, but deep within Fu, a small glimmer of hope began to flicker. He knew that no matter how much it hurt, life would not stop here. He had to move forward. As he drove through the dark streets, his mind was a storm of conflicting emotions. He had exposed the lies, unmasked everything in front of Hawaii and Long, yet instead of feeling victorious, he felt only a profound sadness. Memories of his beautiful moments with Hawaii and their little daughter played vividly in his mind. But now, those moments were nothing more than fragments of a fabricated picture. Fu stopped his car on a deserted road, the dim streetlights casting a faint glow that mirrored his tangled emotions. He sat there for a long time, his eyes red from exhaustion and suppressed tears. Finally, he picked up his phone and called his best friend Hai. "Hi, I need to see you." Fu's voice was hoarse. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" Hai's concern was immediate. "No, I'm not okay. I just need to talk to someone. Meet me at the cafe near your house," Fu said. When Fu arrived at the cafe, Hai was already waiting. The moment Hai saw his friend's haggard face, his worry deepened. "Sit down, Fu. Tell me everything," Hai said, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Fu recounted the entire ordeal, from the moment he discovered the wedding video to the confrontation that night. When he reached the part where Hawaii admitted that their daughter wasn't his biological child, his voice cracked. "I love that little girl as if she were my own, Hai," Fu said, his voice trembling. "I did everything for this family, and yet it was all a lie." Hai remained silent for a long moment before finally speaking. "You did the right thing, Fu. You didn't deserve to endure that kind of betrayal, but you also need to think about yourself now. Don't let this hatred consume you." Fu nodded, but deep down, he knew that moving on wouldn't be easy. The pain was too fresh, the wounds too deep. Meanwhile, Huai returned to the empty house that had once been her home with Fu. She sat motionless in the living room, tears streaming down her face. Everything was gone. her family, her loving husband, and even the man she thought would bring her happiness. They had all turned their backs on her. She knew she had been wrong. Her mistakes had begun the moment she decided to deceive Fu, but her ambition for a wealthy life had clouded her judgment. She could never have imagined that those choices would cost her everything. In the days that followed, Hawaii lived in complete isolation. Friends and family avoided her after the financial fraud was exposed. She received a court summons accusing her of fraud and embezzlement. With nowhere left to run, Hawaii began to feel the full weight of the consequences of her actions. As for Fu, he was trying to rebuild his life. He decided to leave his old job, which had required frequent travel to find work closer to home. He wanted to spend more time with the little girl he had raised, even knowing she wasn't biologically his. "I can't abandon her, Hai," Fu said during one of their conversations. "She's just an innocent child. She doesn't deserve to suffer because of the mistakes of adults." Fu's daughter, Lai, seemed to sense the changes in the family. She often asked him, "Dad, where's Mom? Why hasn't she come back?" Fu struggled to find the words to explain. All he could do was hold her close and assure her that everything would be okay, even though his own heart was still healing. Life continued, but it was forever changed. The bonds of trust had been shattered, and everyone involved was left to pick up the pieces in their own way. For Fu, the journey ahead would be long and painful, but he knew he had to face it for the sake of his daughter and for himself. The road to healing had just begun. Fu sat quietly, holding his daughter Lai in his arms. He didn't know how to respond. Deep inside, he didn't want the little girl to face the truth. To Fu, Lai was still his daughter, and he had vowed to do everything in his power to ensure she had a happy childhood. One afternoon, as he was tidying up the house, Fu stumbled upon an old letter tucked away in a corner. It was a letter from Hawaii, written before she left. With trembling hands, he opened it. The letter read, "Fu, I know I've made mistakes, so many of them. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to understand. I never intended to hurt you. I only wanted a better future for our daughter, but I chose the wrong way. You've always been a good husband and a wonderful father. I only ask one thing, that you continue to love and care for her as you always have. Please don't let my mistakes affect her life. Thank you for everything you've done for us. I'm sorry for destroying what we had. I'm sorry." As Fu finished reading, he felt a whirlwind of emotions. He wasn't sure whether he should feel anger or pity toward Hawaii, yet he realized forgiveness wasn't something he could offer her, not yet. When the court date arrived, Fu chose not to attend. He didn't want to witness anything else related to her. The judge sentenced Hawaii to 6 years in prison for financial fraud, alongside a hefty compensation she was ordered to pay. The years in prison became a time of deep reflection for Hawaii. She understood she couldn't undo the past, but she held on to a small hope that one day, both Fu and Lai might find it in their hearts to forgive her. Meanwhile, Fu chose to close the door on the past. He threw himself into a new job and devoted all his remaining energy to raising Lai. Every evening, he would read her stories, help her with homework, and watch her laugh. Her innocent, radiant smile became his greatest solace amidst the pain. One golden afternoon, as they strolled down a familiar village path, Fu looked at the fiery sunset on the horizon. He smiled faintly. Life wasn't perfect, but he realized that with love and sincerity, happiness could still bloom in the hearts of those who cherished it. Gradually, life began to fall into a new rhythm. Fu left his old job and found work closer to home, allowing him to balance his time between his own well-being and Lai's upbringing. Though the wounds in his heart were still fresh, he refused to let them consume him. Lai was his reason to stay strong. She was his hope, his future. One peaceful weekend afternoon, as Fu sat in the courtyard, he heard Lai's giggles coming from the garden. She was chasing colorful butterflies fluttering among the flowers. Her laughter echoed in the air, bright and full of life. For a moment, Fu's heart felt lighter, as if her joy had the power to wash away his pain. "Daddy, I'm hungry." Lai ran toward him, her cheeks flushed pink from playing in the sun. "All right, let's make your favorite stir-fried noodles," Fu replied with a warm smile. It was in these small, simple moments that Fu found his strength. The warmth of their shared time together became his motivation to keep moving forward, to embrace life with a more positive outlook. One day, as Fu was working, a letter arrived. The return address was from the prison. His heart sank as he recognized Huai's handwriting. He sat motionless for a while, wrestling with a mix of emotions before finally opening the envelope. The letter read, "Fu, I don't know if you'll even read this, but still, I need to write to you. These years in prison have taught me so much. I've come to realize just how blind my ambitions made me." She went on to recount her regrets, her pain, and her yearning to right the wrongs of her past. But for Fu, the words weren't easy to process. As he folded the letter and placed it aside, he sighed deeply. Forgiveness was a journey he wasn't ready to take, but a part of him understood that this journey wasn't just about Huai, it was about healing himself too. With time, Fu continued to rebuild his life. Each day spent with Lai brought new hope, and though the scars of the past remained, he chose to let love and resilience guide his steps forward. For now, that was enough. It opened my eyes and made me realize how much I had lost, things that were once the most precious in my life. You were the best husband I could ever have, and our daughter Lai is an invaluable gift, one that I don't even deserve. I cannot change the past, but I hope you will give me a chance to make amends, even if just a little. I hope that you still love Lai as much as before, because she isn't at fault for anything that happened. If possible, I wish for the day when I can see her again, to tell her how much her mother loves her. I'm sorry for hurting you and our daughter. I pray for you and Lai to always find happiness." Fu read the letter over and over again. A deep sadness welled up inside him, a feeling hard to put into words. He no longer hated Huai as he once did, but he also couldn't forget the pain she had caused. He carefully placed the letter into a drawer, deciding not to respond. He thought to himself that only time and true change could prove anything. Meanwhile, at the prison, Huai lived through lonely and regret-filled days. She worked diligently in the garment factory, doing her best to reform and reduce her sentence. Every evening, she would sit quietly by a small window, thinking about her mistakes and longing for her daughter, Lai. She missed Lai so much it hurt. She remembered every smile, every hug from her little girl. But now they were only distant memories. Every time she received a letter from Lai, tears would roll down her face. Fu never forbade Lai from writing to her mother, and this gesture of kindness made Huai more grateful to him than ever before. One crisp spring morning, as Fu and Lai were walking along the familiar village road, Lai suddenly asked, "Dad, does Mom still love me?" Fu froze for a moment. He crouched down, held her small hand tightly, and said, "Of course, sweetheart. Your mom will always love you. Even though she isn't here, she always thinks about you." Lai looked up at Fu, her clear eyes brimming with trust. "When can I see Mom?" she asked. Fu pondered for a while. He didn't want to deny his daughter's wish, but he also didn't want her to face the painful realities too soon. "When your mom is ready, I'll take you to see her," he said. His answer made Lai smile. She squeezed his hand tightly and said, "I love you, Dad. You're the best dad in the whole world." Her innocent words felt like a soothing balm for Fu's soul. He realized that despite all the pain life had thrown at him, his daughter's love was the guiding light that kept him moving forward. Gradually, life for Fu and Lai became more stable. Fu found a good job with a decent income and spent all his free time with his daughter. He frequently took her out to play and involved her in community activities to help heal the wounds she had endured in the past. One day, at a local charity event, Fu met Mai, a kind and gentle elementary school teacher. Mai was the first person to make his heart flutter again after many years. Not only did she love Lai as if she were her own child, but she also understood and empathized with Fu's emotional scars. "I don't need to know everything you've been through," Mai once said during a heartfelt conversation. "But I believe you're a good man. I just want to share your joys and sorrows in life." Pu looked at Mai, his eyes filled with gratitude. He knew he had found someone with whom he could build a new future, one without lies or pain. That evening, as he sat by the window, gazing at the starry sky, Pu reflected on everything he had experienced. He didn't know what the future would hold, but he believed that as long as he lived with honesty and love, happiness would eventually find him. Somewhere out there, perhaps Hawaii was also looking up at the same sky. She was likely regretting her mistakes, thinking about the wrong she had done. But for Pu, it was all in the past. He no longer harbored resentment. Instead, he felt gratitude for the lessons life had taught him. Dear viewers, this story carries a profound message. In life, honesty and sincerity are the unshakable foundations of any relationship. Marriage and family cannot endure on lies or selfish ambition. When we choose the wrong path, the consequences not only harm us but also deeply wound those who love us the most. True happiness doesn't lie in wealth or outward appearances. It resides in trust, love, and the responsibility we share for one another. Don't let greed and deceit destroy the most valuable things in your life. Remember, every mistake can be corrected if we have the courage to face them, make amends, and strive to live better. Life always gives second chances to those who are sincere. Thank you for listening to this emotional story. If it touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and spread this meaningful message to others. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next heartfelt and inspiring stories. See you in the next video.